All right, Raiders, picking up where we left off. The video showed that I was offline, and sometimes that means the video cuts off. So pick up this part 2 right here. It was the Declaration of Independence in 40 words. We're doing a quick review of where we already come from. Hopefully you remember the Committee of Five drafted the thing, but Thomas Jefferson is considered the primary author. That's like foot stomp, underline, circle. I don't know how else to say it. That is a key fact in U.S. history. You need to remember it. Thomas Jefferson is the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. The 3 parts, this kind of follows the Enlightenment thought. Reasons for breaking away, declaring grievances that the king has violated natural rights. Part 3, listing the attempts to settle differences. So that's the it's not me, it's you part. And then part 4 is the conclusion is declaring independence. The only thing we have left is to separate from this unhealthy relationship. It's not me, it's you. I'm out. And remember, I didn't just say it. I declared it. Just like Michael Scott, I declared bankruptcy. We declared independence. So that makes it legal, right? Here's a little bit more about it. It's still in the review mode here. I know we celebrate the 4th of July. We've just come through the summertime. We celebrated the 4th of July, but it is actually declared on July 2nd. The document was approved on July 4th, which is why July 4, 1776 is at the top of it. But believe it or not, our founding fathers thought July 2nd would be the day remembered by history. John Adams has a quote about it'll be celebrated with explosions in the sky, basically meaning fireworks, parties, and drinking food and fireworks. Well, he was right. We celebrate it, but just on July 4th. And then the thing wasn't even signed, right? Document approved. This is a replica, of course. And then the signers at the bottom, there's going to be 56 in total. 49 of them signed them on August 2nd. And then the remaining 7, even at times other than that, they weren't all in the room at the same time. So some mythology of the document is that it was July 4th, but you can see there, I like to teach you the true history. Now you know it a little bit better. Main principles following the Enlightenment thought: natural rights, consent of the governed, and limited government. So all of this is foundational to the government in the Constitution and the vocabulary you're about to dive into. So from independence to the Constitution, ready, set, let's go. So government after independence, yeah, we were all in this together fighting the war, but now people are going to start to have different opinions on how we should govern. Afterwards, our first attempt at government was the Articles of Confederation. Articles of Confederation was a temporary national government. We're involved in a war. We need something to keep us organized. Technically, I mean, really, we don't even know if we're going to survive yet. Okay, the phrase "it's the American experiment" applied then and really still applies now, because every new decision we make is a test to the experiment of our government. But the Articles of Confederation was definitely not strong enough for an enduring national government. At best, it was a league of friendship, creating a very weak central government, which makes sense. Okay, we were breaking away from a strong single ruler. So the colonies declared themselves to be states. The states wanted to be in a league of collaboration. We'll help each other, but they did not want to have a single strong central government, central leader. And they're going to find out that this just wasn't an effective government. Weaknesses were with that central government was too weak. There was no president, like you would know the president would be today. There's no power to tax the states. They could ask for contributions. Massachusetts, will you please donate your annual fees to the government this year? Please. New York, will you please, you're a larger state, will you please make a larger contribution to the national government? It was not an authority to tax. It was a request at best. Could not draft a national army or a navy. The government didn't have the authority to do that. Each state raised militias, but there was no standing continental army under the Articles. Currency, money itself was different between states. So there was no dollar that was able to be spent in every single state. There was New York coin and Delaware paper and Georgia currency. So that was difficult. And there's no national Supreme Court. So a whole lot of what you understand to be normal today was not the case in the first Articles of Confederation, our very first government. something's going to happen that really highlights the weaknesses of the articles. And that's the key word here. Shays Rebellion highlights the weaknesses of the articles. What it is, Daniel Shays is a farmer in Massachusetts. These farmers were Revolutionary War veterans. They fought for independence, but now they find themselves in debt and being taxed. So they rebel, right? They uprise together. They actually find themselves stronger than the local militia. They win a couple battles. And the concern was, if a bunch of farmers who even are fought as patriots, right? I mean, they're for America. If they can threaten the national government, well, what about foreign invaders? What if the British come back? We'll not be able to organize ourselves with an army. What if the French want to kind of just acquire us? And if they come in with the military, they could do that because we can't organize ourselves right now. So Shays' Rebellion revealed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. People's eyes were open. That's what that picture is. People's eyes were open to the weaknesses of the Articles. And everybody pretty much agreed that we are gonna have to change something. Gonna have to change. Something has to change. So this slide here with the tie-dye all around it, I call this the don't miss it moment. The don't miss it moment on Shays' Rebellion, you should certainly write this down, is that it revealed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Something has to change. What is that change? Well, that change is going to be to write the Constitution. So it starts at the Philadelphia Convention. The initial purpose was to amend the Articles. Let's try to fix what we have. Well, very quickly it was realized that there's no fixing this. So let's scrap the Articles, decide on a new form of government. And to do that, we had to practice that American value of compromise. They're not political parties just yet. I wouldn't, no one would say that there were two organized parties, but there were definitely two different sides of thinking. And these different sides of thinking are going to have to compromise with each other. So the first side of thinking was large states. Large states wanted to remain in power. Okay, people in power always want to stay in power. And a plan was put forth called the Virginia Plan. Virginia was one of the largest states of the original 13. So the Virginia Plan was favored by large states. It gave a government with representation based on population. More people equals more votes, which of course means more influence, more power. Naturally, large states are going to like this plan because they stay in power. Well, naturally, small states are going to not like this plan because it put them at a disadvantage. Small states put forward a plan called the New Jersey Plan. New Jersey is a small state, and the New Jersey Plan is favored by small states. It gives equal representation to all states. One state, one vote. New York and Rhode Island get the same vote. Georgia and South Carolina, one vote each. So that was equal representation, and large state versus small state had the same say in Congress. Well, large states don't like this because they say our population's larger. We offer more taxes. That's not right. We deserve more influence. This picture here, again, breaks it down, shows it pretty well. So I'll let you look at a couple of these graphics on your own. The text, the definitions there, they're important. Read them, okay? The audio guide, you can pause it. You can look at the pictures. Make sure you understand this make sure you understand this as you're working your way through the audio guide. Well, the two plans, we're gonna have to meet in the middle, and meeting in the middle is going to be called the Great Compromise. We make a great compromise with each other. Both sides give a little, and we meet in the middle. Here's how we do it. We're going to have a bicameral legislation. Bi means two, so two bodies. Today, this is exactly the government we still have today. So you guys know that we have a lower house called the House of Representatives, and this is based on population. Your representation is based on how many people are in your state. This is an aspect of the Virginia Plan. So, for example, California, and if you want to look to your right-hand side to my U.S. map, California is a large state. California has 54 delegates to Congress, and that's because they have a larger population. Georgia, on the other hand, I'll use us. Georgia is physically smaller in size and smaller in population. A very populated, city of Atlanta, but pretty sparse population throughout. We're in southeast Georgia. Bacon County is pretty sparse. Georgia gets 16 delegates. California, 54. Georgia, 16. A small state like Rhode Island has one. So it's based on population. That lets large states cast a lot of votes. Smaller states have proportion to their population, and large states like that. That's good. The other side of the compromise is that an upper house, known as the Senate, all states have equal representation. This is an aspect of the New Jersey plan. California has 2 senators. Georgia has 2 senators. Rhode Island, a state this big, has 2 senators. Rhode Island actually has 2 senators and 1 representative. So that's wild right there. In the Senate, everybody has the same 2 senators. So we have 50 states. That makes 100 senators. And both houses must pass all legislation. You got to get the more populated house to pass the exact same legislation as the equally represented Senate. So small states get a balance of the conversation, a balance of power in the Senate. This is the great compromise. Takes the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan and puts it together. And this is the Congress you live under still today. So I know this isn't a government class, and actually for our school, you take government in 11th grade. But this is a pre-read to that, and you got to understand this to move forward in our class. And once you get to government class next year, you should have a good understanding of how it works based off of what I just described to you. Another compromise that we make is called the Three-Fifths Compromise, and this is also related to taxation and population for slaves. So the North wanted slaves to be counted for taxation, but not population. That's because there weren't a lot of slaves in the North. The slaves were in the South. So the North says, oh yeah, tax them, but don't count them for population because that's going to give Southern states more representation. The South, on the other hand, wants slaves to be counted for representation. Oh, they're people. You better count them, but don't tax them because they're not full citizens. They're in bondage. So both sides are coming from a very racist perspective. Neither side is seeing slaves as humans, and of course this is going to be become an issue that leads all the way to the American Civil War. So the agreement then is that 3 out of every 5 slaves would count, both for representation and for taxation. So 1, 2, 3 counts, 4, 5 doesn't count. 1, 2, 3 counts, 4, 5 doesn't count. Or basically saying that an African American in bondage was 3/5 of a person, not a whole person, 3/5 of a person. Now, this satisfied the lawmakers. This satisfied those who are writing the Constitution, but it definitely gives a very negative, overarching feeling to our first document because it does not recognize the humanness of African Americans. And of course, slavery is still an institution that exists throughout the country. Now, I will say the Constitution bans the slave trade in the year 1808, but it does not ban slavery. So importing new slaves, they give it 20 more years. Okay, the Constitution is ratified in 1778, and by 1808, slave trading is done in terms of international shipments of slaves, but you can still trade within the Americas. Slaves who have children, those children can be sold. So this is far from the end of slavery, and a lot of people criticize that portion of the Constitution, and rightfully so. A couple graphics here that represent the Three-Fifths Compromise, and I'll show this same meme again because it highlights the problem with our early documents. We say all men are created equal, but then we do things like the Three-Fifths Compromise, and Thomas Jefferson himself, who wrote those words, owned hundreds of slaves, and this is just the hypocrisy of some of our early founding documents and founding fathers, and this is the story of us. I've always said we will wrestle with the difficult thoughts, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're not shying away from them. We're attacking them head on, and hang with me because we still got a lot more of the story to tell. So debating the Constitution, your last couple of vocabs here. These would not be called political parties, but in a way they did behave as such. Okay, it gives 2 different thoughts to the political process here. And the first group is going to be called Federalists. They are supporters of the Constitution. Okay, yay, Constitution, just the way that it's written, let's pass the thing. The opposite, very creatively named, the Anti-Federalists. They oppose the Constitution as it is currently written for a couple of reasons, and here's why. A really good chart here kind of showing what each side believed and why someone might be on that side. Federalists were typically wealthier, okay, coming from industry families, business families, banking families. They preferred that stronger national government and weaker, more decentralized state governments. Now, they didn't want a king, they didn't want a monarch, but they believed that we're educated and we're wealthier and we don't want our businesses to be affected. So a select group of elite thinkers should be making decisions for the whole country. That's core belief of the Federalists. Anti-Federalists, on the other hand, were typically the opposite of that. They were farmers, laborers, agrarian from the South, and they preferred the opposite. They preferred states to have power because, hey, Georgia is going to make decisions for Georgia, for the farming economy, the growing economy, and New York has no idea how Georgians live. Okay, New York shouldn't be making decisions for Georgia. Let Georgia make decisions for Georgia. That was the belief. And because of this, they didn't want to scrap the whole Constitution, but they demanded a Bill of Rights be added to it. Specifically list out some protections and put it in the document. That's what they demanded. So in summary, this is a really good slide here. Federalists believe the Constitution was fine as written. Let's just pass the thing. Okay, we've worked hard on this. We've compromised, passed the Constitution. Anti-Federalists did not trust the Constitution as it was written and demanded a Bill of Rights. So this is a really good one slide right there. A couple of key figures in each. Alexander Hamilton is a Federalist. He is an elitist. He is a banking man. Makes sense that he's a Federalist. Thomas Jefferson is the leader of the Anti-Federalists. He takes up for the agrarian man. He takes up for the common man. He believes that the Bill of Rights needs to be added. A couple of other Federalists, Hamilton, Madison Jay, a couple of other Anti-Federalists, Patrick Henry, George Mason, John and Samuel Adams were Anti-Federalists. The Federalists actually start running a campaign in favor of the Constitution. They author what is known as the Federalist Papers. And in total, this is going to be a series of publications anonymously published in newspapers of the day and signed by Publius. So that's the nickname. No single person claimed credit for the Federalist Papers. They didn't say, I'm Alexander Hamilton and I'm writing this document, but they signed it by the name Publius, which means the people, as if to say, hey, the people want the Constitution to be passed. Most of them were written by Alexander Hamilton, but a couple of the other anti-Federalists also authored some of them. And, you know, each of the 85 Federalist Papers took on a different topic. So Federalist Paper number 10 talks about factions. Federalist Paper number 51 talks about checks and balances, which is one of those enlightened thoughts right there. And this was just an example of the Federalists trying to reach out to the population and say, hey, talk to your senator, talk to your legislators and tell them to pass the Constitution. That was the whole purpose of the Federalist Papers there. So actually ratifying the thing, let's look at it. 9 states were going to be required to ratify it. 9 out of 13 would create the Constitution. And Constitution Day, when that 9th state ratified it, is considered September 17th, 1787. So you're probably watching this class in August. September's coming up. We'll celebrate Constitution Day in September. Delaware is actually the first state to ratify the Constitution, and they very often call themselves the first state. If you see a Delaware license plate, it's going to say first state. New Hampshire is the 9th state to ratify, which formally adopts the Constitution, right? 9 states were required, so New Hampshire did that. March 9th is the day we begin operating under the Constitution. March 9th, 1789, Articles gone, Constitution in. And our next class, we'll talk about the electing the first president. But George Washington is going to be inaugurated as the first president April 30th, 1789. And that starts the government that you know today. George Washington, first president under the Constitution. We did actually have a couple presidents under the Articles, but we don't tend to memorize their names because that president didn't act in the same way as the constitutionally elected president. All right, moving right along. So amendments to the Constitution. Guess what? Part of ratifying the Constitution was that the Anti-Federalists got what they wanted. They demanded a Bill of Rights, and the deal became, all right, listen, let's just pass the Constitution, and then we'll write a Bill of Rights, which I think that's kind of That's kind of an interesting agreement, because what if the Federalists were only saying that? Yeah, we'll write you a Bill of Rights, pass the Constitution, and then they don't write the Bill of Rights. But at the time, in the time period, a man was worth his word. So the Federalists agreed. Listen, anti-Federalists, vote for the Constitution, and then we will start drafting a Bill of Rights. Okay, you'll get what you want. And that's exactly what happened. They were true to their word. So the Bill of Rights is considered the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They originally drafted 12, but then cut 2 of them, and so we get the 10 that we know. This was demanded by the anti-Federalists in order for them to agree to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights, this is highlighted in red for a reason. The Bill of Rights is designed to protect individual liberties. And as we look at some of them here, now this class won't require that you memorize all 10 of them. Some classes do, and I think it's a great thing to do. But as you look at them, you probably recognize them from your earlier learning in school anyway. First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom to press. That means the newspapers. Freedom of assembly, right? We can gather together and protest if we need to. Freedom to petition. So those are individual rights. My speech belongs to me. My right to say what I want to. That's an individual right. Second Amendment, I know a lot of y'all practice the Second Amendment. You're a gun owner. So this is the right to bear arms. My right to bear arms is an individual right. So I'm just trying to emphasize that the Bill of Rights protected individual rights. Quartering of soldiers is not something we have to worry about today, but it's in the Bill of Rights for that very reason. 4 through 8 deals with the courts, and then 9 and 10 essentially creates what is known as the elastic clause, the necessary and proper clause. And it also deals with states' rights. So 9 and 10 gets invoked a lot as you deal with states' rights and the flexibility of the Constitution. So there you have it, Bill of Rights, crash course on the Bill of Rights. And finally, your last vocab, I'm just kind of tacking this on here at the end of the class. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 established how future territories would be governed. So at the time, look in yellow there, it says Northwest Territory. Those are not states, but people are starting to settle there, and reasonably, we knew that they would apply for statehood eventually. They would become future states. So the Northwest Ordinance establishes how they would be governed, and it very importantly banned slavery in the Northwest Territories. So you can move out there, and future residents cannot own slaves. When that territory becomes a state, and we're looking at Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, those are states now from the Northwest Territories, those would be free states. So this established a boundary between free and slave regions, and it really establishes the North as free states, but the South with its farming economy still having the labor of slaves. And again, that's marching us towards the American Civil War. Great graphic here that kind of talks about the Northwest Ordinance and what came out of it. And what else do I got here? Final slide here. So basic principles of the U.S. Constitution: popular sovereignty, limited government, and federalism. These are basically some definitions that you might find on your page there. Total review, just a review here. What is separation of powers, checks and balances, judicial review? Spend some time reading the definition. And in your toolbox, you also, some of the articles elaborate on that as well. I'll finish with this, a quote from Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson says, "Most bad government has grown out of too much government." So Thomas Jefferson definitely in favor of a smaller government, right? Giving power to the people. And we can compare and contrast the governments of 1789 and the government of 2023. And you can make a decision on how large the government is and whether that's good or bad for our country. So thanks for listening to this audio guide. Remember, there's links to America, the Story of Us. Should you find yourself with extra time, you have plenty to do and plenty of time to do it in my absence, and the story of us continues.